Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're plunging into a really fascinating ancient body of literature, the Brahmanas.
That's right.
Now, you've probably heard of the Vedas, those foundational texts of ancient India. Think of them like this huge ancient library.
A vast collection.
Exactly. And within that library, you've got two main sections, broadly speaking. There's the mantra part, the hymns, the prayers, often called the Samhitas.
Four utterances.
Yeah. And then there's the Brahmana part, which is what we're digging into today. These Brahmanas are, well, essentially the original instruction manuals. The detailed explanations written way back then to unlock the often pretty complex meaning and, the secret knowledge hidden in those older Vedic hymns.
And our mission really for this deep dive is to properly illuminate these crucial texts. They're often described as some of the most important ancient explanatory works out there.
Okay.
And hopefully by the end, you'll have a really clear sense of exactly what they are, what's inside them, and why they were, and frankly still are, so significant.
So, explanatory. Got it. But even the name Brahmana itself, it seems like there are layers there. What's this sort of initial hurdle just trying to define the term?
Well, yeah, first off, we're talking about Brahmana, the word here referring specifically to these texts.
Right, not a person, the literature itself. The term's used in a specific grammatical way, in the neuter gender.
Exactly. And what's quite curious is that the authors themselves, the original composers, and even later key commentators like the famous scholar Sayana, they didn't really offer a direct, simple definition.
Huh. Really?
Yeah. Sayana, for instance, almost defined it by what it isn't. He basically said, which in tradition is not a hymn or a mantra, is a Brahmana.
Okay.
And which is not Brahmana is a mantra. It kind of highlights how they fit together. One is the sacred sound, the hymn.
And the other is the detailed breakdown, the practical explanation.
Precisely.
Wow. Okay, so if they didn't define it directly, that's quite something. How have scholars since then tried to figure out what Brahmana actually means? Where does the word come from?
Well, they've looked at its roots, its etymology. One pretty common understanding is that it derives from Brahman.
Okay, Brahma.
Which itself can mean both the Veda and the mantra. There's even an old saying, Brahma vai mantra, meaning Brahman is the mantra.
Okay.
So Brahmana, in that sense, could mean that which relates to Brahman or the Veda. Makes sense, right?
Yeah, that tracks.
It's also thought to come from the root bri, which means to grow or to expand.
Expand, like expanding on the meaning.
Exactly. Initially, it seems the word might have just meant something like the explanation of a ritual by a learned priest. A specific explanation.
Got it.
But then over time, it seems to have evolved, expanded, you could say, to mean a collection of such explanations by the priest focused on the science of sacrifice, the yajna.
So putting it all together, these weren't just like dusty old rule books. They were the ancient how-to guides, really practical instructions.
Very practical.
But also maybe hinting at deeper stuff underneath. Essentially, ritual textbooks on the details of sacrifice or yajna. That gives you a clear sense of their practical purpose.
That's a good summary of their core function, yes.
Okay, so given that purpose, what kinds of things did these ancient explanations actually cover? What's inside these texts? It sounds like they had a pretty specific structure.
They did. The ancient scholar Apastamba, for instance, he gave a definition. Karmakota Brahmanani.
Okay, what does that mean?
It translates roughly to Brahmanas are injunctions for the performance of sacrificial rites. So focused on the doing.
Right, the instructions.
And Apastamba actually detailed about 6 main kinds of topics these texts deal with. First, vidi, which are the direct injunctions, the commands for performing specific rites. Do this, then do that.
The core instructions. Okay.
Then there's Atharvaveda. These are explanatory remarks, clarifying the meaning of the mantras used or explaining why you do a particular part of the rite, almost like commentary.
Like ancient footnotes or justifications. Makes sense. What else?
You also find ninda. This is censure, criticism, sometimes refuting opposing views or incorrect ways of doing things.
So they weren't afraid to argue or correct people.
Not at all. Then the opposite, prashansha. That's eulogy or recommendation, praising the rite, explaining its benefits.
So selling the ritual, in a way.
You could put it that way, yeah. Then, interestingly, purakalpa. These are references to how sacrificial rites were done in former times, like historical precedent.
Like this is how the ancestors did it.
Exactly. And finally, parakriti, which refers to the achievements or deeds of others, perhaps famous sacrificers or figures associated with the rites.
Okay, that's quite a list. Injunctions, explanations, criticism, praise, history, examples.
It covers a lot of ground.
And you mentioned Vidi, the injunction is the main subject. Everything else kind of supports that.
That's the traditional view, yes. The primary goal is telling you how to perform the sacrifice correctly, and all the Atharvaveda, Ninda, Prasansha, etc. serve that main purpose, explaining, justifying, encouraging, correcting.
Got it. But were there other ways people classified the contents, or was Apastamba's list the standard?
Oh, there are other ways, too. It's fascinating, actually. Another major commentator, Shabara, he offered a slightly different, maybe broader classification. He summed up their subjects under 10 heads.
10. Okay, what did he add or change?
Well, some overlap, of course. He included hetu, which means reasons similar to Atharvaveda, perhaps,
Okay.
and nirvakana, etymology, digging into the meaning of words.
Okay.
He still has ninda, censure, and prasansha, praise. But he also adds sanshaya, dealing with doubt or uncertainty about the rites.
Addressing potential confusion. Good idea.
Right? And vidi, injunction, is still central. Then parakriya, feats or deeds of others, similar to parakriti. And purakalpa, the legendary background or past practice.
Still somewhere there. What are the last two?
He adds vyavadhardana kalpana, which is interesting. It seems to relate to managerial application, maybe the practical organization of the rite.
Like logistics.
Possibly, or how to resolve conflicting rules, perhaps. And finally, upamana, which means illustration or analogy, using comparisons to make things clearer.
10 categories. That's incredibly detailed. It really emphasizes the focus on sacrifice, on yajna.
It does.
But that raises a really important question, I think. Is yajna in these texts just about the physical act of sacrifice, pouring ghee into the fire, chanting mantras, or is there something more going on?
That is the crucial question, and the answer is definitely not just the physical act. This is where the Brahmanas get truly profound.
Okay.
In the Brahmanas, yajna isn't only sacrifice in the literal sense, it's also deeply symbolic. Very often, it represents the very knowledge of creation itself.
Wow. Knowledge of creation. How so?
They use the structure and actions of the ritual to describe the secrets of how the cosmos came into being, the underlying principles of the universe.
So the ritual becomes a map or a model of the cosmos.
Exactly. It's symbolic knowledge. It's not just about what you do in a ritual, but using that action to understand the cosmic principles behind it. It connects the microcosm of the ritual fire to the macrocosm of the universe.
That's a huge leap from just a how-to manual. It makes them much more philosophical or even cosmological.
Absolutely. It blends the practical with the profound. They saw the ritual performance as a way to interact with and understand these fundamental forces and truths about existence.
Okay, that adds a whole new dimension.
Yeah.
Now, given how rich and detailed these texts clearly are, you mentioned earlier that many have been lost. How were they originally organized? And how do we know about the lost ones?
It is a shame so many are lost. We know about them because, well, later texts, other Sanskrit literature available to us actually quote from these lost Brahmanas. So we have fragments, references.
Oh, like finding puzzle pieces?
Kind of, yes. As for organization, what's really key is that for each of the main Vedic Samhitas, the collections of hymns like the Rigveda, Yajurveda, Samaveda, Atharvaveda there are corresponding Brahmanas.
So each hymn book had its own instruction manual.
Pretty much, yeah. Each Brahmana elaborates specifically on the mantras and rituals of its own Veda. For example, for the Rigveda, the main ones we still have are the Atharya Brahmana and the Kaushitaki, which is also called the Sankhayana Brahmana.
Okay, 2 for the Rigveda.
For the Shukla, or white, Yajurveda, there's the truly massive and incredibly important Shatapatha Brahmana.
Shatapatha, I've heard of that one.
It's foundational. Then for the Krishna, or black, Yajurveda, there's the Taittiriya Brahmana.
Okay.
The Samaveda, the Veda of chants, actually has quite a few associated Brahmanas that survive, at least 8 or 10 major ones listed usually, like the Tanya Mahabrahmana, the Shadvincha, the Jaiminya Brahmana, lots of them dealing with different aspects of the chant rituals.
Wow. The Samaveda got a lot of explanatory attention.
It seems so. And finally, for the Atharvaveda, the main one that survives is the Gopatha Brahmana. So each major Vedic stream had its own specific commentary and ritual guide.
That makes sense. A dedicated explanation for each tradition.
Exactly. It shows a very organized approach to preserving and explaining this knowledge.
So let's try and wrap this up. We've taken this deep dive into the Brahmanas. We've looked at their purpose as explanatory texts, their structure, the kinds of information they contain.
Right, the Vedi, Atharvaveda, all those categories.
And crucially, their symbolic depth. How yajna wasn't just ritual, but a way to understand creation itself.
Yeah.
They're clearly much more than just ancient rule books.
Far more. They were the ancient world's sophisticated attempts to organize, explain, expand upon, and find deeper meaning in their most sacred traditions.
Indeed. And, thinking about how these ancient texts, which look like ritual textbooks on the surface, also served as these profound explainers, connecting the very practical act to the cosmic.
Mm-hmm.
It does make you think, doesn't it? It kind of raises a question for us today, maybe. How do we, in our modern world, try to explain complex knowledge, whether it's ancient wisdom or cutting-edge science?
That's a great point. What can we learn about clarity, about providing context, about finding meaning from these efforts made millennia ago? How do we bridge the practical and the profound today?
Something to ponder. Well, thank you for joining us on this exploration today. We really hope you feel a little more well-informed about this truly fascinating and foundational corner of ancient literature.